Good morning. How is everybody? I am thrilled to see so many of you here today. This is a very happy and full January crowd for us. So thank you for getting in your cars. I can't say it's a terribly cold morning, and we don't have wintry mix or snow. So welcome to the Berks History Center. My name is Vicki Hefner, and I'm the education curator here at the Berks History Center. I know most of you here, so welcome. I would like to just tell you some upcoming activities here at the Berks History Center. Peggy Allen is introducing a new distal fink theorem painting design here at the History Center. And the January 31st workshop has just one opening. And because that workshop was so popular, I scheduled a second one on Sunday, January the 8th. And I believe that also just has one spot open if anybody's interested.
You mean?
Sorry. Thank you. February. Our February 14th, second Saturday, is Dr. Benjamin Carter, and it's the African American settlement of Sixpenny Creek, charcoal, iron, and the Underground Railroad. And then as a follow-up, let me make sure I have the correct date, on April the 11th, my volunteer history guide, Paul Schumann, will be leading us on a hike to that settlement down at French Creek. We have been talking, Paul and I, about doing a hike there. And so when I was able to schedule that lecture, I figured, let's do it now. And then our March 14th, second Saturday, is Carrie Moan, which I met 30 plus years ago when I worked at the Conrad Weiser Homestead. He will be doing a presentation, Some Thoughts About Brother Enoch Conrad Weiser at the Ephrata Cloister, which is where Carrie Moan then transferred to after he had worked at Conrad Weiser Homestead. So I'm very excited today. One of my favorite objects, I always say it's my favorite, and then another object is, but definitely in my top 5 is this Dieffenbach organ behind me. It's an object, an artifact that I talk to every school group that comes in here because, of course, they come into our auditorium. I saw a couple of you noticing our kiosk up here. Those are pictures of the other Dieffenbach organs that exist here in Berks County, so please do take note to that. I was lucky enough to attend a virtual lecture that Phil presented with the Ephrata Cloister Winter Lecture Series last year, and then I connected with him in the spring. As a result, our Dieffenbach organ got some restoration work, just a little because it's in terrific shape, and was just recently tuned in preparation for this lecture this morning. So as an introduction, Phil Cooper has devoted the majority of his time to the study of 17th and 18th century keyboard repertoire with the applications of antique keyboard playing practices. Special attention has been given to the Central German Organ School. He has given numerous recitals on important historic organs, and his playing has been broadcast throughout the United States. For the last 2 decades, he has worked extensively to study and document the old Pennsylvania German organs, and in that time, he has performed many recitals on these instruments. His extensive experience with these organs has enabled him to serve as a consultant to both churches and historical societies for the restoration of their antique instruments. He has also appeared as a lecturer and a presenter at various symposiums and conventions. In addition, he has accomplished extensive research into early American keyboard music, often performing this music in recitals. In the summer of 2003, he designed, created, and sponsored a web page devoted to David Tannenberg, as well as some of his followers, bringing together much scholarly research and information and making this available to the general public. I wanted to read that bio because it's very impressive. I think you will agree. So the plan for this morning is Phil is going to lecture for a while, and then he is going to perform a number of songs on our organ. Unfortunately, we cannot move this lectern because then our at-home audience can't hear the recital. So if you would like to see what he's doing at the organ, you're welcome to get up and come and look. He's going to perform, though, about 5 songs. So I would suggest maybe that you wait until the 5th song to get up and come and look at what he's doing. He's going to be pumping pedals and moving the knobs and, of course, playing the keyboards. But please wait until the 5th and final song. Can we have a warm welcome for Phil Cooper? Thanks.
So I have been doing this work of research for about 45 years. Seems incredible. This started out many years ago when I was just merely 20 as an organ builder apprentice to Jim McFarland in Millersville, who at that time was engaged in the restoration of the Tannenberg organ for Linnitz Moravian Church. It was built by Tannenberg in 1787 for Linnitz Moravian Church's new building. And so I was an organist, an organ student at that time, but I was then introduced to the whole realm of organ building and restoration work on historic organs. And there's a whole thing about that, because if you're restoring something that historic, then there's very careful research done to determine the builder's techniques, exactly what Tannenberg would have done, because there were many parts missing on this Tannenberg organ. And so I was a part of the research as well. We went around and visited all the extant Tannenberg organs and some of the places where there were parts of Tannenberg organs left. So I got an education really in why these organs sound the way they do and why they sound different from other historic organs, and more dramatically, why they sound so different from modern organs. When we talk about these instruments, so we can make a label, as we like to do, and refer to these instruments as Pennsylvania German. And we do that because they are a very specific style of organ building that had its origins in Germany. And we don't, unfortunately, know a whole lot about the German ancestor, so to speak, of these organs. But one of the names that you need to be familiar with if you're really interested in this sort of thing is Johann Gottlob Klemm. Klemm was born in Dresden in Germany in 1690. His father was an organist. Unfortunately, we don't know much about him and his training or how he learned organ building, but apparently he learned the art of organ building in Dresden. And at that time, there was an organ culture in that area of Germany, in Dresden and around, that the sources refer to as very sweet and very lieblich, very refined, very genteel. That style of organ building is what we have here in these Pennsylvania German organs. So it's very likely, almost impossible to refute, that Klemm brought this style of organ building from the Dresden area to Pennsylvania when he immigrated in 1733. What's interesting, though, is that in the intervening centuries, all of those organs in around Dresden that were a part of this style have disappeared. They were replaced over time. Many of them were replaced by a very famous organ builder, Gottfried Zimmermann, who was a contemporary of Bach. Bach and Zimmermann knew each other, and Zimmermann was a very famous, well-known organ builder, and he did not ever use any of the old organs or reuse parts or reuse old pipes. All of his organs were all new. And so many of these instruments from the previous style, this Lieblich style, disappeared. What possibly made it through to the 20th century, the rest of the remnants of this were destroyed in World War II. So there's none of this old, special, sweet, genteel style in Dresden area. So that means that the remnants, the descendants of this organ building style now only exist here in this country, in these Pennsylvania German organs. Many in Pennsylvania and a few outside of the state of Pennsylvania. If you were to travel back in time to 1850 and you were to get on a horse and ride around the countryside and visit all of the Lutheran and German Reformed churches in this area, many of those churches had organs built by Clem or Tannenberg or the Dieffenbach. So there was a very distinct early German organ culture here in this area of Pennsylvania. Clem's protege was David Tannenberg. And he's probably the most well-known figure in this because he was America's first full-time organ builder. That's all he did was build organs. And indeed, he was extremely busy at it because he built sometimes 2 or 3 organs a year. Without the aid of electricity, you can imagine that this is a very painstaking, long process. There's many intricate parts that need to be made by hand. Tannenberg learned a great deal from Clem, but unfortunately, we have no organs that have survived from Clem. No organs, no pipes. We have one wind chest that belonged to the organ Trapp, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But Tannenberg's building style reflects this early Central German style. There's a lot in the style of his organs that J.S. Bach would find familiar. So we could say that the style of Tannenberg's organs and those of his followers are Central German, as opposed to the North German organs, which is a different style. Later on, John Jacob Dieffenbach learned the art of organ building. We are not privy to any documentation, nothing that we have discovered thus far that says where he learned organ building. As more of the diaries at Linnitz Moravian Church are translated, more about this might come to light. And of course, we have his son, Christian Dieffenbach, who was the preeminent organ builder of the Dieffenbachs. He built many organs. We're not even sure we have a complete listing of those instruments. I would like to begin some research now that I'm retired from my day job and learn as much as I can about the organs that he built. So we have the beginning, a little bit of tiny picture of the beginning. This is Augustus Lutheran Church in Trapp, and this wonderful old building that has survived. They asked Clem to build them an organ in 1751. This is all that remains of that organ, other than the wind chest, which is now owned by the Brunner Shop. There is nothing of the organ inside. It's just this pine case. It's very plain in appearance, but with tin facade pipes in the front, it would have been a very handsome instrument. Other than what we know from looking at the old wind chest, we know very little about this organ, what it was like. This is an old photograph of the 1770 David Tannenberg organ built for Zion Lutheran Church in Mosellum Springs, often referred to as Zion Mosellum. I like to show this picture to people because this photograph was taken in 1892 and in the old building. And their old building was a lot like the church at Augustus Lutheran in Trapp that you saw a picture of. When this picture was taken, all the people who were alive when Tannenberg built it in 1770 were dead. And now all the people in this picture are dead. And yet, the organ's still alive and still breathing and still functioning. It had a very comprehensive restoration done by the Brunner shop in 2010. This is the only Tannenberg organ that has survived. The case was built of black walnut, and so therefore not painted white. This organ underwent many severe changes when it was moved into their new building in 1894. Perhaps the name Samuel Bowler might ring a bell to some of you. He was an organ builder who worked here in Reading, and he was responsible for rebuilding some of these organs. So the Brunner shop restored it back to its condition in 1770. It now functions and sounds and behaves every way like it did when Tannenberg packed up his tools and left. This is Tannenberg's organ that he built for the Moravian Chapel in Bethlehem. This organ is now located in the Whitefield House in Bethlehem at the Moravian Historical Society. The date of this organ is 1776. And it is entirely original, except for the grain painting of the case. This case is pine and would have originally been painted a color, most likely white. We're not sure for sure about that color, but in the 1830s, it was grain painted. Other than that, the actual organ itself, the pipes, the mechanism, everything is completely original. And so provides a very clear picture of some of Tannenberg's early work. This is Tannenberg's organ of 1795. We're not totally sure of that date because the church history also gives the date 1789. So we can flip a coin, I suppose. This organ no longer exists. It was replaced by a modern organ in 1916. But when the church was rebuilt in this is Haynes Reformed Church, by the way, in Wernersville. When the church was rebuilt, the building was rebuilt in 1879. They contracted Thomas Dieffenbach to work on this organ and rebuild it. And I'm sure that he had Jacob Dieffenbach paint the front pipes, very much as like you see here. We don't know the colors because, like I said, the organ doesn't exist anymore. But put a pin in this because this is important. In a minute, you'll see why it's important that Thomas Dieffenbach rebuilt this organ. We come to this instrument. This organ was built in 1800, and we know that because Jacob and Christian Dieffenbach signed the inside of the organ. John Jacob Dieffenbach, Christian Dieffenbach, 1800. There are metal pipes in the organ. There's a rank of metal pipes, and I'll demonstrate those shortly, that are stopped. So they have little metal caps on the top. So the top is not open. And the caps are lined with newspaper from 1799. The general style of the case suggests 1800. Now, if you look at this portion, this lower portion was added on when Thomas Dieffenbach rebuilt this organ. That's why the proportions seem odd. The original winding most likely would have involved a metal pedal about the size of my hand that your right foot would push down on and to provide wind. Or there could have been a leather strap at the side, although there's no evidence that there was one, or perhaps at the back, which a pumper could pull. So there are some Tannenberg organs. There are some other Pennsylvania German organs. This winding system was fairly common. It's much easier for smaller organs to have the player pump his own organ, because remember, there was no electricity. So if an organ had to be pumped by a second person, that obviously creates some issues. So there was an old story a long time ago about how Jacob Dieffenbach learned organ building. And the truth is that he must have learned from Tannenberg. And the reason this is the case is because the organs bear a tremendous similarity to the way Tannenberg did things. And we're not just talking about the way it looks, but if you take the organ apart, disassemble it into its components and look at all of those pieces, those are made the way Tannenberg did things. This can only be the case if somebody learned firsthand by working for Tannenberg as an apprentice. I'm hoping, as I said earlier, that some further translations of the diaries at Lidditz Moravian Church, that somewhere in the diaries they mentioned that John Jacob Dieffenbach came down and worked with Tannenberg. One of the clues that we have about this is that the Dieffenbach, the early Dieffenbach cases, those in particular, those by Christian Dieffenbach, bear a very strong resemblance to Tannenberg's early work. Tannenberg evolved in the way his cases looked later on, but the Dieffenbach builders, especially, as I said, Christian, his cases look like Tannenberg's early work. So that would give further evidence to the idea that John Jacob Dieffenbach worked for Tannenberg early on. He must have had some kind of innate interest in organs and sought Tannenberg out. Perhaps Tannenberg obviously needed help. In all the work that Tannenberg did, he could not have done that all by himself. He had to have people assist him. This organ was for a long time in Epper's church, and when they asked Thomas Dieffenbach to build them a new organ, Thomas Dieffenbach got this organ in trade, and it was that family that donated this organ to this historical society. It's fairly original. It really has not undergone any changes other than the changes that Thomas Dieffenbach did. So it's all kind of all in the family, so to speak. Now, this is interesting. This is the back of this organ with the back panels taken off. Those metal pipes that you see in the very back there, those metal pipes were made by Tannenberg. And they apparently replaced an earlier rank by John Jacob and Christian when they built this organ. We don't know what that rank was, but it's now functions as what we call 4-foot principal. And the metal pipes are from Tannenberg's shop. What's interesting is, remember I said put a pin in the Tannenberg at Haynes Reformed Church at Wernersville. Thomas Dieffenbach rebuilt that in 1878. And he rebuilt this organ the next year. So could these metal pipes be from Haynes Reformed Church? It's certainly a possibility. Nevertheless, we know they're Tannenberg. They contain all of the Tannenberg signs. One of the things that Tannenberg did, he labeled, as all organ builders do, they label each pipe with a note name, and all his pipes that speak the note D, it's a capital D. It's Tannenberg's way of signing his organs, I suppose. So that's an interesting thing about this instrument. This is, I'm going to need to get my notes. I used to be able to remember all these things quite hard. I don't do it quite enough. This is New Hanover Lutheran Church. And this was an 1802 Christian Dieffenbach organ. This was, unfortunately, these pictures were taken when they were in the process of throwing the organ out. It no longer, but you can see enough from this photograph that this was a fairly large organ. An up-close examination of this photograph shows it had one keyboard. We don't know if it had pedals or not, but there's quite a few stops. You can see them there with their paper labels. So it would have been really interesting to learn more about this. One of the things I'm going to do in my now retired state is I'm going to visit places like this and ask, is there another picture that was taken of this organ earlier shows what the organ looked like when the front pipes were still in? Do they have a contract signed that might list what the stops are? So this is the type of research that I'm going to be involved in. This is a closer view of that same organ. So you can see it was a fairly good sized organ. And then we have Zion Union Church in Orwigsburg. This was built by Christian Dieffenbach in 1808. And here it is in the church there prior to it being disassembled and put in storage by the church. It was also rebuilt very minimally so by Thomas Dieffenbach. The pipes were painted, and you will see the colors in a moment, actually. It is now a resident of the National Music Museum in Vermillion, South Dakota. It's an organization that collects many, many musical instruments from all over the world. And they acquired this from a man named Tom Ader, who was given the organ by a member of the church there at Orwigsburg if he promised to assemble it and have it playing again. The member of the church that gave it to Tom Ader, his wife had been the organist at Orwigsburg. This organ also underwent some restoration work when it was assembled there. They decided to keep the beautiful painting of the front pipes, which, by the way, all these front pipes in these organs were tin and lead. And originally they would have been just bare tin and lead, no painting. That was the style early on. The idea of painting front pipes is a Victorian, late 19th century style. This is a close-up of that organ. Now, what's interesting is that we saw this earlier. This is Tannenberg's organ at Zion Mausoleum from 1770. This case has been measured exactly, how many centimeters, so many millimeters, that the dimensions of this case has been recorded. But if you look at this case, the dimensions are exactly the same. Exactly. So Christian Dieffenbach had Tannenberg's measurements for his cases, and why reinvent the wheel? What works fine, works for one organ builder, works for another one. So that's another clue. This is the interior of the Dieffenbach organ in South Dakota. You can see that all the pipes in this organ are original, and they were all handmade in the old manner. This is a centuries-old way of making pipes. As part of the style of this organ, there were wood pipes for the flutes. And that's not always the case. I mentioned earlier that the style in North Germany was different from Central Germany. In North Germany, most of the flutes were made of metal. This is the case front of the 1808. I'm not really sure of the date of this organ, really. It's 1810, I think. Christian Dieffenbach at St. Luke's Lutheran Church in Schaefferstown. This is all that remains of the organ. This is the front. And pipes were painted. This was also rebuilt by Thomas Dieffenbach. We know very little about what this organ was like or what stops it had. This is a close-up of the front pipes. By the way, the front pipes still speak. You can climb up on a ladder and pull a pipe down and blow in it. and they make a very beautiful sound. They're very old and very original. They do have these wood pipes that survived. These wood pipes were obviously built by Christian Dieffenbach and were later reused by Thomas in this organ. This is an organ at Altalaha Lutheran, and the date of this organ is 1817. This is in Bethel. This was Christian. I didn't know this until recently. Raresburg. It's near Bethel, I think, right? It's sort of. Well, somebody who lives in Adams County, you know. But this, I didn't know this until recently, but this was Christian Dieffenbach's church. This is where he went to church on Sunday. And so when he built this organ, he built a fairly large organ. It was at least 10 stops when it was built. So it had a size almost like that one we saw at New Hanover, the 1802 organ in New Hanover. It was a big organ for this case. And he must have provided extra stops and extra care because this was the organ he was going to hear every Sunday. The church was rebuilt in the 1880s, I believe, and Thomas Dieffenbach rebuilt this organ. He either added 2 stops or he changed 2 stops, but there's 2 stops from him. The pipes are from him. The others date from Christian Dieffenbach from 1817. I visited this organ recently. It had been many, many years since I had seen it. And I had learned more and more about organ building over the years. And when I visited this a couple of years ago, I was immediately struck by how enormously beautiful the pipes sound. The organ's not in very good shape. It needs major restoration work. There's a lot of tuning problems. But when you play it, you are just immediately struck by how beautiful old sound this makes. And so it is definitely worth restoring and having it play really well and having it sound be more well known to a wider audience. This is the closer view of the front pipes there at Altalaha Lutheran, and a close-up of the original keyboard for Christian Dieffenbach. And this is the interior of that organ, and you can see the pipes have shown some wear from many years of tuning. This is not difficult to rectify. It just means a lot of straightening out work. And these are 2 wood pipes from that organ, 2 different stops. They're made of walnut, Pennsylvania black walnut, which is the wood Tannenberg used for his smaller wood pipes. Notice also the feet. These are the feet here. They're made from 1 block of wood and made so that they fit directly in the chest. You can see where it sits in the chest. And there's no rack to hold them like there are in modern organs. This is definitely a German characteristic that you find in German organs. This is a metal flute. And here he has provided at least 3 or 4 ranks of flute pipes. And this one is stopped metal. And you can see the cap at the top. There's no opening at the top. It's closed. So it's stopped like a wood pipe. And this is old newspaper that used to seal that cap to make it airtight. Very old construction. This is a smaller scaled pipe that's used for a stop called a salisette, which is a term used by organ builders to denote a set of pipes made by metal that's smaller scaled that sounds sort of stringy. Very exquisitely beautiful sound. And of course, I had to visit Christian Dieffenbach's grave in the graveyard of the church. This is a photograph that came to light recently. If the photograph looks crooked, it's because I did that to straighten out the actual picture, because whoever took the picture had the camera leaning or something. This is the 1818 organ that Christian Dieffenbach built for Himmel's church. This is a wonderful photograph. that shows an unaltered Christian Dieffenbach organ. This is the way Tannenberg organs looked. If I were to tell somebody, hey, I found an old photograph of a Tannenberg organ, look, they would believe it. It looks like Tannenberg's early work. But this is Christian Dieffenbach and unaltered the way it was originally built in 1818. It was rebuilt and put in their new buildings, Sunday school or auditorium, but unfortunately it burned in 1959, the year I was born. So there's no way I would have ever seen it. So that's a loss. Here's another angle of that same organ. Notice the stop knobs on both sides of the keyboard in rows with paper labels that show what the stop names are. This is obviously Zion Lutheran Church in Strausstown, and it was built in 1819, and this was taken out of the church and thrown away in 1922 when the church bought a new organ. What's interesting is if you can look there, these pipe shades here were installed accidentally upside down. That looks odd. It's supposed to have an upward shape toward the center tower, and it looks funny. This is an organ well known to one member of the audience. This was built by David Dieffenbach, Christian's son. And this is the last generation of the Dieffenbach organs where they made their own metal pipes. These metal pipes, although painted gold, are actually tin and lead, like all these organs had. And they were handmade by David Dieffenbach. We don't know if Christian was still alive when this organ was made. We're not sure of the date, right? But it's exquisitely well made, has a beautiful old sound. It's a chamber organ built for a house. So I am going to demonstrate the stops of the organ. And the first two stops that I'm going to demonstrate on this instrument are made of wood. The first is called Grobgedeckt. German grob means big, but it's called Grobgedeckt because it's 8-foot stop. And an 8-foot stop, if you're not organ term familiar, means that if you press middle C, you get middle C. The other stop is the Kleingedeckt, klein meaning small. It's called that because this is a 4-foot stop, which means that if you press middle C, you get the C above it. So everything plays one octave higher. So I'm going to demonstrate the Grobgedeckt by itself, and then the Kleingedeckt, the 4-foot stop by itself, and then I will play just a little demonstration of them together. It's not holding wind too well. That's that re-leathering issue we talked about. The next two stops I want to demonstrate are both 4-foot stops. This I will demonstrate a 4-foot saliset. That's that stringy kind of sound that I was talking about that the organ alto Lutheran has. This has very strong speech to the sound, kind of like the T in the word to. So if you go to, you'll hear this. This is very old 18th century style pipes. The other stop I'm demonstrate after that one is the 4-foot principle that Thomas Dieffenbach built, and the metal pipes that you hear in that stop are Tannenberg. So that leaves the other two stops, the Quintadena, which is colloquially spelled Quintadane on this organ. It's a stopped metal pipe with a cap at the top, but the lips, these are the lips are very low, and so it has a very peculiar kind of quinty sound. This is also a 4-foot stop, and then the last stop will be the 2-foot octave, and 2-foot means that if you press middle C, you get 2 C's above. And these are the pipes you see in the front. Many organs, smaller organs, Pennsylvania German organs, the 4-foot principle was what you see in the front. But this organ is so small that it's the 2-foot in the front. So that's it. There's 6 stops. Just a word about the size and character of this organ. It has a very small, diminutive sound. We call the organ building world and organist world, we call this a chamber organ. It's like chamber music, like going to a concert of a string quartet. Small, intimate. People often wonder, how can you find music to play on an organ like this that has single keyboard of only 49 notes and no pedals? And the reality is that there's so much music that is appropriate for this organ that when I put together a concert for this, my problem is not what to play, it's what not to play. Because I can easily play for 3 hours in all appropriate German music and early Pennsylvania German music. So there's a lot of music you can play, and I'm going to play a few pieces now, hoping the wind holds up. The first piece is a preludium in C major by Central German composer named Johann Krieger. Johann Krieger was a contemporary of Pachelbel in Nuremberg, and the two were friends. And then after the preludium in C, I'm going to play 2 pieces by Pachelbel. I'm going to play Chorale Wenn wir in höchster Not sein, when in the hour of utmost need. And I will play that on the 2 wood flutes, 8-foot, 4-foot. And then the last piece is a very beautiful Fantasia in C major by Johann Pachelbel. And so those are the three Central German pieces that, even though the music predates this organ by quite a bit, it's very, very appropriate sound. Music and sound go really well together. I'm going to play a different chorale of Pachelbel because this book is very large, as you can see. This one is Es wohl uns Gott gegeben sein. And so this is, again, we played on the two flutes, 8 and 4, Grob gedacht and Klein gedacht. As you can see, the key desks were made for hymnals and songbooks, not these kind of books. Play two more pieces. These are from a music book written out in 1820. And it was written out by a man named William Schöner, who lived, and he was an organist who lived here in Reading. And this book is here in the the library. And so I copied out the pieces originally to have for the recording that I made here in 1992, I think, for the CD recording. There are 3 CDs that I've put out so far, by the way. Just make a plug for myself. They're available from the Oregon Historical Society, from their catalog. Volume 1, if it's still available, has this organ on it. This first piece is called Greenwich Hill. I don't know if they said it Greenwich Hill back then, I'm not sure. And it's just a little keyboard piece, and I will be playing on the flute stops on the organ. And then I'm going to play a piece called Washington's March, which is interesting. In the book, he begins the piece in E major, and a couple of measures in, it switches to G major. So we don't know, maybe his wife called him away to have to do some chores or something. And when he came back, he forgot that he was writing in D, and so he continued it in G. I will play the whole thing in G.